Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 5 of the Bacon and Egg Show. Coming to you live and direct from the greater Austin metro area. And we got a lot to hit on today. We'll get into this a little deeper, but holy shit, we have some actual live sports action happening in the world today to talk about. So we'll get into that a little bit. Jay, how's it going?
Kerry, what is up, man? Hey, just want to welcome everybody back to the most must-see YouTube podcast, maybe ever. I mean, we're the reviews are through the roof. Feedback's been great, so thank you to all of those of you that have watched and that have given us some feedback and sort of what you might want to hear coming up. We want more of that, so looking forward to hearing from all you listeners, and looking forward to having a good show today.
Absolutely. Keep the feedback coming in. Hit that subscribe button, like the shows. Every little bit helps.
Pound that subscribe button. Pound it.
It with a hammer. Well, maybe not a little. Maybe not. We want you to keep your computer to where you can still see the show, or your phone. But so don't use a literal hammer. But yes, we would. It all counts the same, so we would appreciate it. Well, Jay, let's jump into it here. Let's kick off the cup of coffee. What you got?
Hey, man. So first of all, this came down not too long after we recorded last week, I believe, but with Major League Baseball's plan moving forward to try to get some sort of a season going, the first thing that jumped out to me was that there will be a designated hitter now across the league, across baseball, as opposed to the American League having the designated hitter and the National League not. So I think that's a big, in terms of baseball long-term, like the National League not ever having the designated hitter, the legacy of the league, I guess, if you will, the difference thing that makes the two leagues different, the senior circuit, as the National League is often referred to. I think that's a big deal for baseball. What do you say?
Yeah, it is. I think in the historic aspect of it, it definitely changes things. I don't know. I don't know if it's just the nature of a pandemic, and kind of lack of having any sports or anything like that. It doesn't bother me as much, the whole DH thing. And honestly, I think we all kind of saw this coming, with Major League Baseball, kind of juicing up the balls for the playoffs, different some approaches that they've tried to take to try to boost scoring and interest in the game. And it doesn't incredibly surprise me that this was their opportunity to basically say, okay, well, we don't need pitchers hitting anymore. Let's go ahead and start plugging DHs in and trying to boost some run scoring. So I think it was inevitable. It's not a huge shock. It does absolutely change the dynamic of, like you mentioned, the National League versus American League, especially when it comes to the World Series. That was an element that always played a big part. Whether it was a National League team plugging in a DH in an American League park in the World Series, or an AL team trying to plug a pitcher in, in the National League. So it's definitely interesting, but I can't say that it's a huge shock.
No, and purist is the word I was looking for. The baseball purist, that want to talk about the designated hitter and the National League not using it. And to me, at this point, I'm with you. I was always a National League guy until the Astros went to the American League. And
right.
I sort of okay, maybe that is better. I always thought, well, this is the way to play baseball. Why would you have a person that never even enters the field? And then now that the Astros have been in the American League for 6-7 years, however long it's been, I sort of get it. And I love watching Zach Greinke hit. I almost wish Greinke would hit, because that he can match. And so Greinke having a designated hitter, but outside of him, there aren't many pitchers that you want to see swing a bat to begin with.
No.
So to me, I think it's, however baseball gets this season going, I think it's probably the right decision to go universal DH and move on from it. So I think that's the right call.
Well,
We got the okay. So yeah. Go ahead, Kerry.
no. Go ahead. No, you got it.
No, I was gonna say the NBA players had a conference call. Some of the top stars in the league had a conference call earlier this week. People on that call: Chris Paul, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard, Stephen Curry, Damian Lillard, Russell Westbrook. Any name absent that can stand out to you?
Draymond Green.
Maybe some, maybe somebody with a rather large beard from the city of Houston.
I
That was
don't
not
know
on
who you
that
could be
call.
referencing. I don't. Nothing. Nobody. It doesn't strike me.
Nobody stands out to you. A recent MVP of the league.
Oh, I don't know.
What does that mean to you? Does it mean anything to you that Harden wasn't on that call?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, Harden is one of the league's biggest superstars, an MVP winner, one of the best scorers that we've seen really in NBA history. You know,
Ever.
Ever.
One of the best pure scorers of the basketball in the history of the game. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he can score from anywhere. Every strip club in Houston, he can make a 3-point jumper. I mean, like anywhere.
And he's done it.
He's done it. And he's done it plenty, and he'll continue to do it. I don't know. I don't know if there's too much I guess it could be easy to take, to kind of think that there's something to this. I think the fact that Russ, that Westbrook was a part of this call, I guess he kind of serves as a representative in a way for the Houston Rockets and those interests. So maybe there's something to Harden not being involved in this. Maybe we're looking a little too far into it, but it is interesting that, one of the league's best players and biggest stars, not involved. What do you think of it? Is there something you're taking away, or?
It's surprising to me that he wasn't on the call, but I think he might have been, he might have told Harden might have told Russell Westbrook, hey man, you get on this call, you do this, like it's fine. I'm okay with not being on this call. I'm James Harden. I don't have to be on this call. I'm not overly confident. I don't think so highly of myself that if I'm not on this call, that it's going to be a shot at me. But even though, people are asking that question now and they want to know why he wasn't on the call. But to me, it's really not a big deal. I think that it's one of those things that you look at it from a perspective of how many people do you want on a phone call to talk about the same stuff? Everybody wants to play. And all they did on this phone call was talk about being on a united front to bring the league back and to be able to get this thing going for them so they can finish up the season. And I don't have a problem that Harden wasn't on the call. I'm not looking that much into it. I just think that it was interesting that Russ was the representative, as you said, from like a Houston perspective, and he wasn't part of it. But not a big deal to me.
I mean, I guess you could also look at it from the angle of, well, there were two Lakers on the call, with Anthony Davis and LeBron. And the fact that Durant, that KD was on the call and he isn't playing at all this season, so.
So does this mean? Is this more of a shot at James Harden from these players? Is he not liked?
I've always kind of got the vibe that he wasn't that well liked. I don't know. I mean, again, you don't know. I mean, but it also seems like he's hung out with these guys. You see them in the off season. I don't know. Again, it's kind of hard to say without really knowing that if, did the league hand down an invitation to Harden to be a part of this and he just declined and just, had better shit to do? Or was this something that, is there something to him not, the NBA maybe thinking he's not really one of the true faces of the league, which I think is ridiculous, to be honest, whether you like him or not.
Yeah.
I mean,
not many more recognizable people that play basketball than James Harden.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's definitely interesting. But I mean, where do you stand on this whole, this united front to kind of restart the league? I mean, obviously the players are going to want to get paid. They're going to want to play ball.
Yeah, this is about money. It's always about money.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is about money and because they don't want to take a pay cut. And how can they not take a pay cut? Get the games going as quickly as possible. So for me, this is about money for them and wanting to play and get paid. I get that. And LeBron, it's LeBron wanting to not waste one of the last seasons that he has a shot to get another ring.
Yeah.
And that to me it's more of a ring thing for LeBron. But for most of these guys, it's about money and wanting to get paid. So I don't have a problem with that concept if I'm a player. But how realistic is it? You know, I still haven't seen anything new come up that even remotely makes me think that the NBA is any closer to starting. So, I get why they did it. They want to take a stand. Okay, but how? You know, we still haven't seen any plans. We talked about this on the show a few weeks ago, the different locations that have offered themselves up. We haven't made any progress on that up to this point. So, yeah, they can have a phone call or a Zoom or whatever it was and get on there and talk about, we all want to have the same message.
Yeah.
That's fine. But what does that do in terms of getting the league started? Nothing.
Yeah, it does nothing. You LeBron and every superstar that was on that list, that was on that call, can get together and talk all they want about how bad they want to get back and play. We get that. But yeah, I mean, it's
and
the
maybe Harden's coming
circumstances
from a
still
place
haven't.
if he's like, guys. Yeah, maybe Harden's coming from a place where he's like, guys, this isn't happening. Like maybe that's Harden's mindset. Who knows? But either way, I think it was the call was important from a player perspective. But in terms of getting the league going again, I don't think it is really that big. I don't think it makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think it was earlier in the week, or it was a separate NBA league call that this is Woj tweeted this out that caught my attention about there. I guess there was the commissioner had some kind of, when the league does start back, if there is basketball starting back again, that there would be no private jets allowed for the teams for competitive balance. And I just got a nice, kind of laugh out of that because, yeah, Adam Silver's now concerned about competitive balance in the NBA, and it's about private jets. It has nothing to do with, and I should, with the caveat, this doesn't really bother me as much as it bothers other people about the kind of superstars getting together and forming like these super teams. That doesn't really bug me, but it's interesting that a league now wants to talk about, a commissioner wants to now talk about competitive balance when
airplanes are involved. And good luck telling LeBron he's not going to get on his private jet, Adam.
Right.
Commissioner. Good luck.
Exactly.
Because LeBron's getting on his private jet, and so is Anthony Davis is getting on LeBron's jet with him. So
exactly.
As far as I'm concerned, that's whatever. How many people have private jets anyway? But the point is the league will start up again when the league tells the players the league is going to start up again. That's when the league is going to start, period. The players can say anything that they want, but the league will be ready when the league says it's ready. And that's all.
And that said, I do, after, the crack on Silver about the whole competitive balance thing, I do actually think Silver is the type of commissioner that'll make the right decision when it's, I think he's shown that he's been pretty reliable in that regard. They made the decision early on to cancel the games and shut things down. And I don't think Silver's going to rush
of
in.
all the commissioners of the big four sports, I trust him the most.
Exactly. So I think that'll say a lot when they do decide to, make the call and open, kind of open the league back up and finish out the season. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think we're quite there yet, but who knows?
No.
And let's see what else we got going on in the cup of coffee today. Oh yeah. So today, speaking of opening things back up in live, actual real sports to a certain degree, the German Bundesliga opened back up. No fans in the stadium. I was able to watch, I don't know, I think you were able to watch most of the match, but Borussia Dortmund versus Schalke today, pretty big rivalry to open back up the Bundesliga season. Dortmund's in the title race. So a lot of storylines there. I was only able to watch the first little bit, more kind of the player intros and everything, but playing in open, just empty stadiums is completely bizarre, no?
Yeah, it's bizarre to watch as a fan at home, or just not a fan even. I'm not a fan of either one of those teams, but as an observer of sport, to watch games played with an empty stadium is very weird. That was a clinic, by the way. That was basically a training session for Dortmund in such a big derby every year.
Yeah.
Every time those two get together, that was really a clinic that Dortmund put on. But aside from the game itself, watching the game with nobody in the stands and being able to hear the coaches
Yeah.
yelling and the cheering, and you do hear cheering. That's the thing about it, is you would still hear cheering, but you knew exactly where it was coming from. It was coming from the benches and the coaches that were there. And there was something raw and very real about that, because as somebody, like we talked about your hockey experience and playing in front of nobody in an empty arena, and it's the
Yeah.
same, and it's the same, I've played on many soccer pitches that there's nobody there except the players, and the cheering that comes from a bench when you score a goal, or when something good happens or something bad happens, the reactions that you hear, every bit of that rawness of what's actually, of the people that are actually participating in the contest. And to me, that was the coolest thing about watching the match today, was you hear every bit of it, and it makes you feel, to me, it made me feel like I was actually closer to the game in that regard.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, it is, you're kind of connecting with the match experience in a different way than we have before, right? Usually when you watch on TV or even live in person, the crowd noise, the piped in music, the advertisements, everything that's going on kind of separates what the team is doing in a way, from your experience at the game. So to be able to have that where you can actually hear coaches yelling out instructions, you can hear players yelling for the ball on a different part of the pitch, you can hear them, like you mentioned, celebrate a goal, which that's a perfect way of putting it. Like at our hockey games, if someone scores, we're up on the bench yelling and making noise and all those things. So you're connecting with that team through your viewing experience in a completely different manner, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, as I mentioned, I only got to see the first couple minutes for the stream just buckled down from all the viewers, but I think the thing that stood out most for me was, Dortmund plays in one of the most kind of renowned environments in world football, and that, it's a loud, rocking building that's just notoriously difficult for away teams to come into. That didn't have any effect on the home team today. You mentioned they just steamrolled Schalke, but to watch the players come out of the tunnel, well, they actually had to change that completely. Borussia Dortmund came out first. Right. The substitutes come out with mask on their face. They sit distanced on the benches, and then Schalke had to come out completely separate. We're used to these two teams coming out with the crowd going crazy, the pregame handshakes, all that. And that to me was just such a different experience to kind of have one team come out, they get lined up, they're ready to go. The other team coming out completely separate. It it just was bizarre, and just this empty building. And I think by the time things get really rolling here in the future, I think we'll probably be a little bit more used to that whole viewing experience. But for now, it's pretty surreal.
I didn't have a problem with it at all. It didn't make me want to watch it any less. I don't
No.
know if that's going to be a popular opinion in the grand scheme of things. I think people enjoy the crowd. People enjoy that part of the environment. For me, as an observer of the game, I have no issue watching a game in that manner. I don't need the crowd noise to enhance my, hearing a crowd, you roar when a home crowd roar, or whatever, or boo, or whatever it is. That's a really, really cool part of the viewing experience. But even at home, that's what I mean. We're watching it on the TV, obviously, but to me, I don't need that for it to be watchable at all.
No. And I think if anything, I don't want to call it a distraction, because like you said, the fans, the fan noise and the environment definitely adds to the viewing experience. But when you kind of strip all that down, you're just left with the pure sport of it, right? You're kind of just left with, you're not dealing with the cameras panning to someone in the crowd when there's action happening. You're not dealing with, the announcers, really, kind of going on tangents about something in the crowd, or the boos, the cheers, all that stuff. You have just the game. It's just the players, and in kind of an unaltered, state, if you will. I think it's pretty interesting. I definitely, I don't think it takes away from from being able to watch the sport. I know a lot of people disagree. They say you have to have you need to have the fans, but I don't know. I think it's fascinating to see.
I had no problem with it. I'd watch it regardless. Any game that would be on, any soccer that would be on right now, I would watch it. And the fans don't take away anything from me from that. So, yeah,
On that note, real quick, are there any sports that you think it would take away from?
No, I mean, I don't really like, because I watched the Korean baseball league the other day. There's nobody in the stands. The emotion is real from the players. If you're observing the game, I can't really think of anything where I wouldn't watch it, where it would, if I already would watch that game, that I wouldn't watch it because the fans were in the stands. I can't see that happening.
Yeah, I think NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, I think all those, those to me would be fascinating to see in the empty stadiums, in a sense similar to soccer, where we're talking about that kind of interaction that you get to experience now between players and teams and coaches that you typically wouldn't get on a broadcast because of crowd noise. I think American football would be the one that's interesting to me, how that would play out in an empty stadium. I think that is, the crowd has become such an integral part of American football strategy. Teams, with things like silent counts, with signals coming from the sidelines, with crowd noise trying to get an offense to, false start. I think that aspect of it. I think American football could be the really, really interesting one to see in an empty stadium, just because it has become such a big part of, using crowd noise to your advantage. So that one could be fascinating.
Some even allegedly piping it in through their speakers to make it louder than the stadium actually is.
I've never heard of that
Allegedly,
happening.
right?
Allegedly,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
It's like
Yeah.
not turning
The
on the air
Saints.
conditioner or something. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of American football,
those sort of things just happen.
yeah, I mean, it's, they just occur from time to time, not intentional, right?
Right.
So on the subject of American football, I don't know if Toro Queso will be popping up today. We'll see if he comes ducking around, but
No, I talked to him earlier. He said he wasn't going to be able to come by today. He actually was on his way down to Tijuana. He had a show to do today. It's a social distance wrestling match. So I don't know how he's going to pull that off. But if anybody can, it's him. So he had to go do a show in Tijuana this weekend. So he's already heading down that way. A social distancing wrestling match. I don't know how they're going to pull that off from 6 feet apart. But
I've got full faith in him, though. Full faith. I think he can totally pull that off. Maybe we'll get to hear from him next week and kind of hear how that went. But
yeah, he'll probably be a little banged up, but I bet we hear from him next week.
Well, you want to get into some Texans talk here? Let's. I think it's time for a little "What would Bill O'Brien do?" What's on your mind with the Texans this week, Jay?
If we had background music to this segment, it would be the Benny Hill theme song, right?
It would have to be. I don't think there could ever be any other song to describe Bill O'Brien's current situation or what he's got going in Houston. So
for me, I wanted to hit on some offensive line talk today. I know Toro Queso talked about the lineman that the Texans drafted in the 4th round, Charlie Heck. I know he talked about him last week. But in addition to the draft pick, Heck, looking at the rest of the offensive line and probable starters week 1 of this season, you got Tunsil, obviously, just paid him a bunch of money. Worth it in my mind. I just wish he would false start less. But
that's kind of a shorter term deal than I think people would have liked, right? That was the whole thing with the Tunsil situation, if I remember correctly. It's big money, but it's a fairly short deal, isn't it?
It is, and I don't mind it, though, just for the sake of, if you're going to pay him that much money, you needed to pay him now.
Yeah.
And so you weren't going to give him 5 years at that rate, and you probably had to pay him a little bit more than he originally asked for, because you only wanted to give him that short of a deal with that big of dollars attached to it. So in the grand scheme of things, would I have rather had him locked up for 7 years, until he's in his early 30s.
Yeah.
That'd be ideal. But for in terms of just getting it done now and getting him on the field, because that's how important it was to get him on the field, I don't mind the deal. You got Sharping, who's 23. His deal is good through 2023. Nick Martin, who they just re-signed to a new deal last year, I believe. His deal is good through 2023. He's only 26. You got Zach Fulton at right guard, who's 28 years old. His contract's good through 2022, but they don't have any guaranteed money left on that deal. So if something comes along and they want to rotate somebody back into that guard
Get out
spot,
from under that. Yeah.
Get out from under it really quickly. And then Titus Howard, who's 23 at right tackle. He's the probable starter there, and he's under contract through 2024. So everybody except with the exception of Fulton is under contract through at least 2023. The offensive line was ranked 20th at the end of the season by Pro Football Focus, which is, you look at it, that's one method of measuring an offensive line and measuring a player's one player's ability as well. I understand that, but that's one ranking that I looked at that I thought was interesting because after 2018 they were ranked 31st. After 2019 they were ranked 20th. So the Tunsil addition, as well as some development by some of those other guys, I feel was key, and that's the type of progress you like to see with a line that you will have all under contract for a few more years.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but was Deshaun Watson not the most sacked quarterback in the National Football League last season?
As great as I don't know that it probably was, but I still think Watson has a thing for holding on to the ball too long.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's not completely putting that on the offensive line because that is also quarterback. That's decision making. That's getting rid of the ball. There's a lot that goes into that. I just found that's interesting though. The ranking of 20th for the offensive line, even with if that's taken into consideration the amount of sacks that the Texans, that Deshaun Watson was involved in.
There's some things that go into that, I feel, in terms of how long those linemen are able to keep their blocks, how long they're able, if it's past a certain point, then you shift the blame to the quarterback sort of a deal probably. And I think that's why they did, they definitely did give up a ton of sacks last year. And I feel like that's probably why they weren't ranked so poorly in many of the ranking systems that I saw them ranked. But just the fact that I still feel like the eye test shows you that there was improvement last year.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that with another year, this is going to have to be – Watson can't take those sort of hits this year. And if part of them are Watson's fault, the line's going to have to be that much better at holding their blocks and keeping him off the ground. And that's why I feel like the offensive line is important any year. But for the Texans to take the next step, I think the line is going to play a huge role in that.
Yeah, and I think also, we can harp on the actual manner of the trade all we want, but I think Johnson coming in at running back now, for him to get, I think with this offensive line, I think to help out Deshaun Watson, the running game really needs to be a focus for this season. I think David Johnson really needs to be reliable in a 20+ carry type game-to-game season. And I think if the offensive line can get that going and get him productive, it'll cut down on the amount of sacks. I think that rating could grow up even more. I just find it interesting, as you were talking about the contracts, just kind of going back down the list there, you got 2024, 23, 23, 22, 24. That's a pretty tight window for essentially what is going to be, with Sharping is young, Titus Howard's young, but otherwise you're looking at kind of they drafted Heck, but there's going to be this kind of overhaul of the offensive line that's probably going to have to happen over that span. And, what would Bill O'Brien do? How is he going to, what's the approach there? There's going to be a lot of draft picks for offensive linemen in the Texans' future, I'm thinking.
Well, Bill O'Brien will do what he always does, which is put all of his eggs into this basket that he is right now, which in order to save his job, I don't know why he felt he was very adamant that the Hopkins trade was what was best for the team. And we disagreed with that and a lot of people disagree with that. But whatever his plan is, he's going all in at this point because he feels the pressure. He knows that he has to take the next step as a head coach. We talk about him needing to take the next step as a head coach. Bill O'Brien knows that he has to take the next step as a head coach. And when we saw them peak at 24-0 in the second quarter at Kansas City, when we saw that peak, that was the next. That's now Bill O'Brien's ceiling is there. He knows he has to take the next step. He has to finish the deal in that round of the playoffs, and he's doing everything that he feels like he has to do that this year, and if not this year, then the next year. And he feels that. I really do think that Bill O'Brien feels it, and I think you see it in the way that he reacts to the trade not going through and things not going his way, because he has this very distinct plan of what he wants to get done. And when it doesn't go that way, that's when I feel like he's getting frustrated. So whatever the plan is, it's going to happen his way, because nobody's going to tell him no, and he has the keys to the castle. So we're going to see Bill O'Brien in all of his glory, whatever that means. We're going to see it.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work out, he's going to be leaving the next coach and GM with a pretty interesting contract situation across the board. It's going to be quite a mess for whoever has to come in and try to clean that up. So I hope for the Texans' sake
that to
that
me is
it works, because otherwise it's going to be a pretty messy clear out of contracts in that situation in a few years.
And that's exactly the point, is he's doing everything to set himself up. He doesn't care about what's happening next. And I think most coaches would tell you that they would do whatever they have to do to make themselves successful. I get that. But he's truly the cupboard is in terms of assets outside of players is bare at this point.
Yep.
And I think that if a free agent signing isn't coming next year or two, that he might be in trouble, but he's really putting all of his cards on the table right now. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, I think we're going to take a quick little break here. Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we jump into the break? We'll be back with some little bit more discussion in a few.
Look, quick pause for a good cause. We'll see you guys on the other side.
Sounds good. We'll be back in just a sec. Welcome back, everybody. Nice short little break there. We're going to jump back into it here on the Bacon and Egg Show, episode 5. And Jay, we were talking, international soccer a little bit first segment, and there was some news on the domestic side that came across this week that I found pretty intriguing. And that revolves around essentially the MLS partnering with not only the various the clubs within MLS, but also like USL clubs, like in San Antonio and El Paso, around the country, and then with youth soccer. Basically, this is an announcement from MLS about setting up an academy system to help boys and girls. I think that should also be noted as well. Boys and girls, a way for them to develop their skills and get noticed, and eventually, the hope would be signing with their local MLS or USL clubs to play professionally, but maybe eventually for the US national team or something of that sort as well. I think what stood out to me so much about this news was there's a quote in there that says, in addition, the partnership will create a clear pathway for boys and girls to be seen and scouted regardless of location or financial resources. And I think when we talk about youth sports in the United States, it's kind of the exact opposite of that. It's location and financial resources play a huge part in what kids get to play what sports in this country. And to me, that just, obviously, caveat, we'll see how it all plays out. But to just come right out and basically say it doesn't matter where you're from, or how much money you make or your parents have, if you're good enough, there's a spot for you. and they'll develop you. What do you think about that? I mean, you know, you've got Finn. How would that play into your decision as a father with, you know, youth sports on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, with the thought of it not mattering where you're from or how much money you have, I'm very skeptical of any youth sports organization in this country to truly make that the number one mission and it not be about money. This youth sports is a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country, and the people that are making money off of it don't want to stop making money off of it. So I love this concept. As a parent, I would love to at least think that no matter what my child's background is, or no matter if I could afford to send him off to some fancy private training institution or whatever, that if I couldn't afford to do that, that I could send him to this program and that he or she would be seen. And it's a novel concept in this country, but I hope it's attainable. And I hope that it's something that they actually strive to and get to as a result. And obviously the national program for the United States at the men's level, the women have been doing just fine for themselves, obviously, multiple World Cups.
Their paychecks don't reflect that, but
no, and that's another conversation for another day, because the women are vastly underpaid. But for the development of the men's program in general, to be able to scout these players from the very beginning, from a young age, just as they do in other countries across the world, for that matter. Not, I was going to say Europe, but across the world.
Yeah,
these players are scouted from such a young age that they can put together. And that's why the United States, despite their population, has never had the success on the men's front on the world level, because we don't develop our players that way.
yeah.
So for me, it's a big deal if it's executed. It's a game changer if it's executed properly. I'm just skeptical.
Yeah, the optimist in me thinks, you know, how wonderful this would be. You know, you mentioned the national team, like however many years it is down the road that the national team is made up of players from, you know, that came up out of, you know, some of the rougher neighborhoods around the country, you know, immigrant kids, you know, African and, you know, Latin immigrants that have maybe first or second generation that have been here that are talented, and there they are playing for the US national team, as opposed to, you know, and it's not necessarily anything wrong with this, but you look at the team now and it's essentially made up of private school kids from California and the Eastern Seaboard. You know, there's, you know, people have always said, well, if you go to Los Angeles or Houston or, you know, Phoenix and something, and you go into these poor neighborhoods and you go play soccer in the streets with the kids there, you'll see some of the most talented, that's where the most talented players in the country are. And we haven't seen that filter up to the national team, or, you know, maybe even to the club level, you know, with MLS quite yet in this country. And I think the cynic in me, though, thinks that US soccer as an organization and MLS view this as that eventual payday. You know, you mentioned the money being the driving factor with this. Well, the way that MLS operates is that as an umbrella organization, they sell to players. It's not the clubs. You know, if Austin FC, as I'm wearing an Austin FC shirt today, if Austin FC develops a kid out of Southeast Austin and they turn into the next big prospect talent for a club in Europe, when that player is sold, that money goes to MLS. You know, Austin FC will get some kickback, but like the league is wanting to make money off this, and I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. I think soccer in this country is such an interesting dynamic at the youth sport level compared to our other sports here. You know, it's if you played American football, you have to go to play for free essentially at a university before getting on to the pros and actually getting a paycheck in your early 20s. You know, does this open up a new world for 15, 16-year-old, you know, prodigies at the sport to actually go get paid for their talent at that age, instead of having to go get education you know, at a university. So I don't know.
Go play school. Yeah. No, that to me is, I never understood not being able to earn money for. It's a trade. Like, they're football players. It is a job. It is a trade. I mean, anyways, we've talked about that. We've run the pay for play conversation through the ringer over the past couple of weeks. But just those, if you can get paid, if somebody's willing to pay you.
Yeah.
If you're 14 years old, if you're 10 years old, if you're 80 years old, if somebody's willing to sign you to a contract, you should be able to get paid for your talents and your abilities, no matter what. You go to college to get a degree so you can get a job and get paid. So for me, this is the other countries around the world seem to have this right, and we are, as a United States of America, has been lagging for forever, I guess, in that regard. And I think this is the right step in that direction, maybe. But again, I'm just skeptical. Obviously, the MLS is doing this to grow as a brand,
absolutely,
to elevate themselves, because they want some homegrown talent. They want to, be able to expand their financial portfolio so they can afford to pay some of these homegrown people that might have gone to Europe otherwise, but pay them to stay in the domestic league, and so they can have that sort of exposure for themselves, as opposed to a Christian Pulisic going to Chelsea, or the next American wonderkin to come through. They want to keep him in MLS, and how do you do that? Money.
Exactly. And the timing of this is also interesting with the court decision coming down. I think it was maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, regarding the pay discrepancy between the men's and women's national teams. How much of this is goodwill, news drop, to kind of, the thing is, this is more of an MLS announcement. US soccer they didn't seem to really be,
No, but they'll
I'm
obviously
curious about
directly
that.
benefit from that.
Yeah. So there's that aspect of it. The whole G League discussion that's been in the news here the last few weeks, or last couple months, I guess, with basketball talent opting to go to the NBA G League instead of into the college ranks. And I think, I think maybe we're starting to see that shift about, these athletes only have a finite amount of time in their lives to make money off of their skills. And, I welcome it. I think it's a great opportunity, and hopefully it works out for, but also I just one more quick thing on it. We talk about, trying to attract that talent into the MLS system. One of the discussions around why the U.S. national team hasn't panned out, given the size of this country and the athletic ability that this country has, has been trying to get kids of a certain age or whatever to choose soccer as a sport that they're going to carry on with and try to play it at a professional level. And I wonder if this becomes one of those things where, when parents are analyzing what sport is my kid going to play and focus on, that this becomes more of a conversation, because it's like, oh, well, now you can, actually go on and make some money with it. So.
All right. Thanks, man. Yeah, man. So, sorry about that. I got a package. I got a delivery right there in the middle of the show. That you never know what's going to happen.
You never know what's going to happen.
Village Lane.
I thought maybe it was Toro Queso. He was back a little early from Mexico, but I was hopeful. But
sorry about that, guys. Yeah. So, were you just wrapping up the MLS conversation?
Yeah, just hitting on one little thought that came across about, the discussion of how, people in this country said, oh, well, kids don't want to, there's no way for them. They want to end up playing basketball because they can go to the NBA. They want to play football so they can go to the NFL. That how much of this becomes a conversation for parents in a greater manner now of like, oh, well, instead of going to play school for a few years, why don't you play soccer and you can start making some money earlier on. It's going to be curious to see how it plays out.
Definitely shifts that conversation. I think if it creates an option, you follow the money and you'll see it, and it will make a difference. Absolutely. That's a great point.
So we'll see. But moving on, speaking of college athletics, I think it's time for one of our favorite segments that's going to be recurring, and that is,
oh man, We're back.
Oh,
For
I can
those of
still
you that are
hear.
not aware, you don't know where the reference is. Go ahead, Kerry. Tell them.
Oh, it's just, that huge Sugar Bowl win, Sam Ellinger just letting the nation, the world know that Texas was back.
Back. Yeah, man. Yeah, we're
He's
back. And then what
back.
happened last year? Oh,
Beat Utah.
guess we're not. We're not as back, but we're a little bit back. But we're not like
Kind of
back.
back.
Maybe
It's kind of back. Like,
we're almost back. But for the segment purposes, guys, it'll be we're back. We're gonna talk some Texas Longhorn football, whatever comes up, Longhorns. So, what are we diving into today with the Horns, Gary?
well, you shared with me earlier this week a CBS News article, CBS Sports article. It was an interview with Princely Uman Milan, who is a local kid who committed to the Florida Gators in this 2020 recruiting class. 4-star defensive lineman. I think he's edge rush kind of guy. Don't quite remember, but it's interesting in that he's from here. He's from Manor, right? If I want to say he's Manor grad, but
Yeah, it's right up the
regardless,
street.
Austin metro area.
18 UT is 18 minutes from his house. That's
Yeah.
that's how close he lives to the university.
And by all accounts, close with a lot of the players. He was on campus quite often, attended a lot of games, close with the coaching staff. How did this kid end up at Florida? Good get by Florida. I mean, I'm not.
Great get by
Yeah.
Florida. Yeah, good pull for them. Good pull to be able to come into University of Texas backyard and pull a 4-star guy. But I don't know how he got out of here. Maybe it's one of those things where you only have so many scholarships and you can't offer everybody, and maybe he's just one that I don't know. We'll see, but it's interesting to see somebody that close to the university with all the ties that you mentioned that didn't actually end up here. So we'll see how this develops. We'll see what comes from this. But to me, I think on face value, that's a loss. That's an L for the Horns. But obviously, we don't know what the big in the grand scheme of things how this will play out.
He had some interesting things to say in this article, because the article essentially revolved around, and the cynics can say, well, it's a CBS Sports article. Of course, this is going to be a one of their biggest properties is SEC football. So of course, this is going to turn into an SEC hype article, which is easy to say. But basically, the article gets to why did you go to Florida as opposed to going to UT in your backyard without, why did you not end up there when you had such a good relationship with Texas? And he kind of boiled it down to what, a really simple business decision. Look at the NFL draft. He had a quote, and I don't have it right here in front of me, but basically said, if I went to Texas and I put up X amount of sacks this season, I might be like a 6th or 7th round draft pick. If I go to Florida and I put up the exact same amount of sacks, I'm a 1st or 2nd round pick, based off of the cachet that the SEC has. And the NFL draft, the first round of the NFL draft, half of those picks, just under half, 15, I think, of the 32 draft picks were from the SEC. Right. Those numbers don't lie. I think it's fascinating, which there is kind of a funny story. I remember hearing about Princely about, and I don't know how true this is, but it was one that was kind of making the rounds on the recruiting forums about his official. He attended the A&M recruiting event, their big pool party on campus there, and there was a pool volleyball game happening, and he went up, spiked the ball right over the net, and apparently hit Jimbo Fisher right square in the face. Some people said there was some blood involved, but it was there was a funny GIF that started making the rounds on Twitter that people were sending to him, like a photoshopped Princely spiking the volleyball right into Jimbo's face, and he retweeted it out a few times and got some love off of that. But it was
like a meet the parents type of situation.
Yeah,
where it was
yeah.
Nice.
I think that's actually exactly what the clip was from, but it was with Princely's face hitting Jimbo's face, and it was so got some good laughs out of that. But he
that's great.
but I find it hard to disagree with what he says. If those are the reasons for him to go to Florida, and again, we tie it back in with kind of the MLS thing. You have this finite amount of time to make your money. And if there's a sure path for you to go make that money, then why not take that? I think it just speaks loud and clear, really, what UT is up against in terms of this rebuild, if you will, of getting back into the kind of the national prominence conversation, right?
The segment is called "We're Back," right? This is a very good example of why we're not, because Texas is not considered, with good reason. How many Texas Longhorns have been drafted in the last, decade?
Yeah.
Like there's this
Yeah.
huge gap. Some of that's coaching, some of that is lack of development, some of that is there's a lot of factors that are in play there. But of course, Texas is not back. This is a great time for us to make the point very clear that Texas is not back. And until Tom Herman is starting to win some of those battles in recruiting for the players that are, because it's a very smart business decision on his part. So until Texas is back into that conversation of, oh, hey, let's go there, because I know not only are we going to win, but I'm going to get developed and I'm going to be drafted high for the NFL. And until that's happening again, we're not back. Texas is not back and won't be back. And I don't know that we're there yet. I think when we talked about Herman's recruiting classes and the gap when we looked at the years in terms of who was leaving, the classifications of the players, and there was that clear line there where Tom Herman's recruiting classes began. And maybe we start to see Texas. Maybe we have to have Herman here, because if Texas gets rid of Tom Herman and we're starting all over again, we're just about to see if Tom Herman is that guy. And I think that's why Chris Del Conte has given Tom Herman the least that he's given him, because we're just about to see if Tom Herman is going to go from here to here in terms of elevating Texas to getting those NFL draft picks. And that's where Tom Herman's legacy will be, if he can turn that corner. And we'll see in a couple of years. We're going to start to see it, but we'll see it in a couple of years if he's the guy or not.
Yeah, I think this upcoming season, coronavirus concerns and all that stuff aside, I think this upcoming season is going to say a lot. It's, he overhauled the assistant coaching staff, senior quarterback. There's a lot of kind of built-in things that he's got coming into this season that I think are, going to be to his advantage. But the last thing Texas needs is another big coaching change, because it is resetting that clock again. And we'll see. I think he's got to put together, I don't know, get your opinion on this, but he's got to put together a string of 10-win seasons, I think, to even start thinking about competing at that level of recruitment that the SEC, the big name SEC schools at least, bring to the table. And one 10-win season and a Sugar Bowl win over Georgia does not erase a decade of mediocrity. And until it starts being 2, 3 10-win seasons in a row, then we can start talking about, the national conversation.
I think I've made this comparison before, that the Sugar Bowl win that season was like the 2015 Astros, clearly overachieved and got, won that playoff series, or won that playoff game, and made that run against the Royals, had that really tough series against the Royals. They overachieved that year.
Yeah.
And I feel like that the Longhorns in that, with the Sugar Bowl win that led to the We're Back, that was the Longhorns version of Tom Herman getting his team to overachieve ahead of time. I see the parallels are there, man. And I feel like that the next step for the Astros was they won the whole thing. I'm not saying the Longhorns are going to win the national championship this year, but if Tom Herman is the coach that Cristo Conti thinks he is, then we're going to start seeing those. This is the year that we start to see that trajectory to where we might think that Texas truly is on the way back to being an upper echelon program across the country again, not just locally, but not just in the state of Texas, but across the entire country again.
Agreed. We will see. Well, I think it's getting to be about time for the breakfast wrap.
Man, let's wrap this thing up, man.
Wrap it up. All
Put
right.
a wrap on it.
Well, we'll kick off the breakfast wrap with some, it's a tough discussion to have, but some bad news in Austin this past week about Shady Grove calling it a, it's the end of an era, if you will. It just joins a list of other places around Austin that from this pandemic have shut it down. Threadgills, Magnolia Cafe. Who else? I know I'm missing a bunch here. The list is just growing and growing.
A lot of bars, a lot of 6th Street, a lot of bars on 6th Street that have decided that they're just not going to make a comeback after this. They've already made those decisions. I mean, it's some landmark institutions. It's one of those things where I don't think Austin will stop being the live music capital of the world. I think that there's enough in place that will remain in place after this, where Austin will still have a thriving scene as we tiptoe back into normalcy. But it's going to take a hit, and just the scene in general of Austin is taking it, just like everywhere else. It's not a unique, a unique situation. But I think Austin has enough of that charm that Austin is known for, that structure of what the type of town that it is at its core. I think there's enough of that around where Austin will get through this just fine.
Yeah, it's it's history moving along. Things close and open, and they it's a shame. Shady Grove was awesome. We have a little bonus segment after today's show at the Little Austin Music History with Randy Rodeo. We'll kind of touch on some of this Austin history, but it's it's a shame. It had some good. Used to live right there back behind Shady Grove on Toomey, there off Barton Springs, and had some good times hanging out at that place. So you just hope that whatever fills that spot, tries to keep that alive, even if it's not Shady Grove. Whatever takes that place I just hope it's not condos. But
yeah, well, fingers crossed. It definitely hit my wife hard. Definitely hit Daniela hard. That Shady Grove means a lot to her and her history and growing up in Austin. So I know she's not alone there. There's a lot of people that have a very attached feeling to a lot of these places that are shutting down now. So we'll get through it though, and hopefully people with some money will come through once this is all over with, and they know that it's safe to start reinvesting money, and hopefully somebody will buy Shady Grove as is and keep it there, and we'll buy. That's the best case scenario. We keep these Austin institutions in place. Somebody hopefully will come through and keep that bit of history.
I agree. What you got in the breakfast wrap today?
Your buddy Joe Buck has said that Fox is going to – it's all but a done deal that Fox is going to pipe in crowd noise and digitize fans in the stands for NFL games. So not only are you going to have to listen to Joe Buck call a game, but you're also going to have to deal with fake crowd noise and digital fans. How does that make you feel as a viewer?
As long as the digitized fans are like the Fox football robot things that they come back from commercials and stuff with,
Cletus, isn't this name Cletus?
Cletus the robot. Like, as long as it's just a crowd full of those Fox robots. This goes back to what we were talking about in the first segment with the crowd noise and all those things. Like, I'm fine without it. Like, I think it's going to look pretty stupid if they do that. Digitized fans and piped in crowd noise for the broadcast. Like, it's just not going to match up with what's happening on the field. I don't know. I think it's classic Fox. I mean, just like they've done with the glow puck back in the 90s when they had the NHL rights, and
that was classic stuff there. What if the NFL, what if they put all of their games on a 5-minute delay and they produce the sound into it so it's the appropriate, like the appropriate thing. I'm not saying that'll make it better, but what if that's the idea? What if their idea is to do that?
That would absolutely throw me off, because I'd get fantasy updates that someone scored a touchdown when I'm watching the game 5 minutes before it actually happens on TV. So um,
They would have to, yeah, man. I didn't even think about that
I
side
gotta
of things.
pick. I gotta pick my poison on that. I think let's you know, I'd rather get the fantasy updates in as real time as possible. But
Yeah.
I know
Wow.
I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I think Fox has definitely got the money to do it, you know, in a way that I think could come off as authentic as possible. So we'll see.
Yeah. What else you got, Career?
Well, let's see. What do we got going on? Bob Watson passed this week. Another, you know, sad bit of news from the sports world. You want to go into a little bit about his history with the Astros and kind of what he
Well,
means?
just one of those. Well, to me, he's one of those guys. When you think about the history of the Astros, Bob Watson is one of those names that pops up immediately, and I think that's probably the team that he's best known for playing for. He played for a handful of other teams throughout his career, but I think he's best known as an Astro. But something that I learned, and I feel like it's something that I should have known before his passing, was that he was the first black general manager to win a World Series with the Yankees in, what was it, '96, I believe. So that was something that I learned about Watson that like I said, I feel like I should have known that already. But no, it's another big loss for the game of baseball and for sports in general, and by all accounts, just a well-liked man.
Yeah, it's a shame. You can always tell when these things happen, the kind of outpouring from, you know, all angles, you know, whether from the executive side or his time as a player. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's uh, crazy times. So
So jumping back to the NFL, allegedly, the Browns and the Seahawks discussed a trade.
I heard
The
about
number one
this. Yeah.
overall pick for Russell Wilson. This is the year that they took uh, Baker, touchdown maker, with the number one pick. Uh, they discussed Russell Wilson for that number one pick, and so who's worse in this? Is who made the dumber move? Seattle for offering Russell Wilson or Cleveland for turning it down?
Cleveland for turning it down, I think. Um, I There's some interesting things that have come out of Seattle the last few years about Russell's relationship with the rest of the team. I know there was talk about, you know, kind of, I guess if you want to call it, like, lack of respect from the locker room towards Russell Wilson, whether that involved Richard Sherman or, um, you know, I don't know if Earl Thomas was involved in it when his time with the Seahawks, or Marshawn Lynch, whatever it was, but there seemed to be some weird tension going on between how Russell Wilson was treated by Pete Carroll and their general manager, John Schneider. But it's like, so in a way, it's not all that surprising that Seattle explored that option. I guess what is surprising is that Cleveland, who's been in quarterback hell for their since they were, you know, revived as
Since
a
forever, dude.
franchise, you know,
Yeah.
forever, turned down the opportunity to get Russell Wilson. And I understand, you know, it's a number one pick. I mean, not every number one pick pans out. They know that from experience. And so that's the biggest surprise to me. That's the biggest surprise, that Cleveland said no, not so much that Seattle put the offer out there. I also think it's interesting the timing of that news coming out. It wouldn't really surprise me if Russell's moved at some point in the next year or two.
Interesting. Very interesting, because he's obviously viewed across the league as a winner. So I wonder if it's a reputation thing, you know, like if he's truly lost that locker room, if they truly don't, I don't know if they don't believe in him, but if they don't want to follow him anymore,
Yeah,
if that's playing a part in this, because he's obviously a winner and he's a good quarterback, and he's a great quarterback. He's not a good quarterback. Russell Wilson's a great quarterback.
great.
So
Yeah,
I feel like it would be something like that would, I don't know if somebody would be willing to take that on. Obviously, somebody would be willing to take on a winner like Russell Wilson, but I am surprised that Cleveland, if that was a real offer, that they turned that down, because you have a proven winner, and if you believe you have a window of opportunity, which I really do feel like they think they have that with Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. They haven't given up on him yet, and they shouldn't. But it's interesting to me that they would have turned that down.
Exactly.
And
The sure
what would
thing
have
versus the
happened
crapshoot draft pick,
if Baker does Seattle take Baker Mayfield with the number 1 pick then that year? I mean, that's something to,
It's a
the
great question.
revisionist
That's
history
yeah,
type stuff. But
yeah, exactly. But yeah, then there's the contract situation, all that kind of stuff. If the Seahawks are that confident in someone like Baker Mayfield, who would then be on a rookie deal, that opens up money for them to spend elsewhere in that team, which is now tied up in Russell Wilson.
which is when Seattle won all of their biggest games, including their Super Bowl, was when Russell Wilson was on his rookie deal. So that, yeah, great point.
So maybe they were just trying to reproduce some of that magic, but
maybe so.
Well, I think we're up against it. I think that's about it for today. Anything else you got, Jay? You want to hit on before we call it?
Oh man, good talk today. Good conversation as always, and it's the fact that sports are coming back at least at a snail's pace here. If it's being done in a safe manner, I'm all for it, and I'm thankful to have something new to watch on television. But we're still putting out some good content here, regardless of what's on the television, and it's good talk today, man. So we'll do it again next week. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, if y'all want to stick around, we got a little some bonus content.
Oh yeah,
here
that's
coming
right.
up after the show. Our little Austin music history segment with Randy Rodeo. So if you want to stick around for that, stick around. It'll be coming up here right after we're wrapped up. But yeah, Jay, this is a good one, man. We got a lot to cover, and I'm sure we're gonna have even more coming in the next week with things starting to slowly open back up, and hopefully we're hearing more about things opening back up and not some more, not so much of these closings that we've been hearing about. So hopefully good news continues to come in, and we start finding our way out of this thing. So
Absolutely, man. Good stuff.
All right, man. Let's do it again next week. Talk to you then.
All right, we'll do.
Peace.
Late.
ATX represent. Fatal, baby.
Only no six on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing a swing down MLK? Capital City.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We got a special segment here today. Brought on Randy Rodeo. For those that don't know, he's a infamous or famous Austin legend here, lover of Mexican food, big sports fan, and Austin music historian. And we wanted to do something a little different today. It's gonna, just a quick little discussion. Everybody's familiar with the Willie Nelsons and Doug Soms and kind of the famous names and on the Mount Rushmore of Austin music. But we thought with everything kind of going on, places closing down around Austin and kind of the history fading away a bit, if you will, that we thought it was important to kind of have some discussions about those that maybe aren't as prominent in the Austin music scene and the history of it. And couldn't think of a better person to come on to kind of discuss that. So Randy, you want to talk about somebody that maybe doesn't get discussed as much in this big picture of Austin music?
Yeah. It's like you said with the Willies, and Doug was pretty much an Austin guy, but I mean, he was from San Antonio. But so much of the famous people that Austin is known for were not really from here. So today I'd like to talk about Rocky Erickson, iconic psychedelic maven. In fact, a lot of people think that Rocky was the one that came up with the word psychedelic. Anyway, this starts in the mid-'60s, but I want to jump ahead to about 1979. And you were talking about the bars that are closing. Well, one of the great bars is over on 29th Street nightclub. It was called the Rome Inn, which later became Texas French Bread. It was right behind Boy. And my girlfriend at the time and I went to go see Doug. And he was never real organized. You never knew who was going to be playing with him or anything, you know, but he had a habit of letting other people like do a short opening set. So we got there a little early and there was this guy just sitting in a chair kind of with his head back against the wall. He looked like he was asleep and he looked like he was like the dirtiest, homeless looking, long-haired, unshaven, thin, looked hungry guy just sitting in a chair leaning against the wall. And he stood out because it was like, who is this? And Doug kind of popped in for a second and went over and talked to this guy, and they were talking, and then he left to, I'm sure, go out back and smoke. But this guy gets up on stage, sits in a chair. He's got his Gibson 335, plugs it into an amp, and it's just him and the guitar. And I'm like, man, Doug, well, from the first chord, and once that screaming howl came across the PA, I looked at Shannon and I said, I don't believe this. And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, that's Rocky. That's Rocky Erickson. And she said, who's that? You know, she was from Beaumont. And I was like, you don't understand, man. I said, you don't understand who this guy is.
Now,
So
oh, sorry, real quick. That's what I just want to make sure I understand a little bit of this. I guess, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit here, but he was in a mental institution, right? So that was after he got out of the mental institution.
That's coming up.
Okay.
Not once, but twice. So let's move back to 1966. I'm 11 years old. I've already been playing guitar. My guitar teacher, Mr. Wood, Wayne Wood, had put a bunch of us guys together for a band. And actually, by the time I was a freshman in high school, we actually won the Battle of the Bands and also, but anyway, this hit song came out, You're Gonna Miss Me, by the 13th Floor Elevators in 66. And that was Rocky Erickson and a bunch of South Austin guys. He went to Travis High School along with a couple of friends of mine that I met later in life who, anyway, every garage band everywhere was playing that song. And if you ever, that is the song. And the first four chords of it, in fact, Michael Dell put that song on a commercial for Dell Computers before Rocky died. And I hope he made some money off of it because he never did make a lot of money. But anyway, we were all playing those songs. And the dirty little secret, and what I always wonder about Rocky is was he mentally ill? Chicken and egg. Was he mentally ill and all his LSD use made it worse? Or did he get his mental state from, I mean, massive, massive amounts of, and so what happened to him, they signed to a record label in Houston called International Artists. And one of the biggest crooks of all time, a guy named Leland Rogers, who was a very opportunistic guy in the mid-60s, and he saw that the psychedelic thing was happening. So he signed the Elevators. He also signed Bubble Puppy out of Corpus Christi, who, one of their guitar players I got to be very good friends with. They never made it. They never got a nickel. The only money that any of those bands ever made. And by the way, Leland Rogers has a brother that's kind of famous named Kenny Rogers. So that's why I hate him.
Oh. not a fan of the Gambler, huh?
No, and that's why I've always hated Kenny Rogers, because of his brother.
That could be a good story for next time.
Well, anyway, that's all. Anyway, International never paid these guys. The only money they ever made was touring. So You're Gonna Miss Me, I think in the U.S. it was a huge hit in Texas and in the South, and then in the U.S. it did make it to the top 10, I think, because the Elevators got to be on American Bandstand, which was on every Saturday, and all the bands that had hit songs would make an appearance with Dick Clark on American Bandstand. At the time, it was probably still in black and white. Great show when you're a kid, because they play all the hits and the kids are dancing, and then they have a live act. Well, the Elevators get on, and after they would play a song, and then Dick would always interview the band and have whoever was the leader of the band introduce, okay, well, this is John Ike Walton on bass, and this is Benny Thurman, and and Tommy Hall. Well, he went to Rocky, and he said, so who is the head of the band? And just straight face, because he was such an innocent soul. I mean, Rocky looked at Dick and he goes, Dick, we're all heads. And so the sad part of this is once they had made some money and they had some hit songs and they were touring and everything, then by the 67, 68, that's when everybody started moving to San Francisco. Steve Miller from Dallas moved to San Francisco, and Doug Somm, and he got busted in Corpus, and those charges got dropped, and he got out of Texas, and he went to San Francisco. So then the Elevators followed him to San Francisco. They all were there in hate, and there are some albums that are bootleg albums of the Elevators. It was 3 big halls in San Francisco. There was Winterland, Fillmore East, Fillmore West, and in the Avalon Ballroom. And I think it's the Elevators at the Avalon. I've got that record somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it's actually not a bad record. Now, the problem with Rocky is he should have stayed there. And no telling what he learned there, because he got back here and he had a problem in San Antonio playing a show where he just kind of broke into speaking in tongues. So they took him to a mental hospital in Houston where he had shock therapy, intense. But then he got out, and my friends that went to Travis with him, Travis High School. That was another thing about Rocky. He was about to graduate his senior year, and he dropped out because they told him, if you're going to walk for your diploma, you've got to cut your hair, and he wouldn't do it. So anyway.
Well, we're up against a little bit on time here. I guess, what's kind of, if you could fit Rocky into which kind of the legacy of Austin music. You mentioned Doug kind of in a way, and I've heard a little bit about that before, I guess, bringing Rocky kind of back into the fold, back into the scene a little bit after the whole mental home thing. But, where does Rocky fit in this pantheon of Austin music?
Rocky fits because of influence. And he was an unbelievably intelligent guy. He just, after he went to Rusk and came back a second time from electroshock therapy, he just wasn't the same. But like, here's I don't know how well that's going to show up, but it's called Where the Pyramid Meets the Eye. And what it is it's a tribute album that was released probably 15 years ago. And it's got artists all the way from ZZ, REM, T-Bone Burnett. I mean, it's song after song. And I don't think Rocky ever really realized his influence. And the other thing is, if I wanted to make a recommendation, that's a great record. It is unbelievable. But their very first album was called The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor Elevator.
Okay.
It's got the I. Well, when somebody, that one and another one called Easter Everywhere, that's the only two that I recommend. The other ones are trash. Because of international artists. They released a live album one time and it was studio songs with applause.
Oh, that's terrible.
But anyway, somebody asked Rocky one time, what is psychedelic? What is that? What does psychedelic mean? And I met him several times. The guy he was something else, man. But he said, you don't know? That's where the pyramid meets the eye. So I'll leave it at that.
All right.
I enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for, yeah, this is great. That's some good history there.
And you guys are doing a great job, man.
Hey,
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
thanks for
we'll
coming on.
we'll get you back on soon to talk more Austin music and Austin history and all that stuff. So
Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em. Thanks for coming on, Randy.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Welcome.